I'm Matt at Nexus Baseball, and this is episode 15 of the Tommy John Epidemic. This series is a YouTube read of content from the book Plague of the Gods, an outsider's perspective on baseball's Tommy John epidemic, which is available now on Amazon. I decided to put this content on YouTube to make the material as accessible as possible. This series examines the science behind the most superhuman action the human body can produce, accelerating a baseball up to 100 miles per hour. We are quite away from any consensus though, as these changes and the differences between starters and relievers complicate any attempt to be universal. Likewise, baseball is much more complex in its execution than discus, for example. In discus, the goal is to throw the discus the maximum distance possible. Baseball pitchers are not looking to throw the hardest possible ball, but to do so with movement imparted by different grips and with a delivery that disguises that grip and the ball's location as long as possible. This can be accomplished both with different arm angles as well as speeding up or slowing down one's delivery. There are a large number of minor leaguers possessing mighty fastballs that do a poor job of disguising it and are hit extremely hard, keeping them out of the majors. In addition to Ryan, another example would be Aroldis Chapman, the record holder for the fastest pitch in MLB history at 105 miles per hour. Although having suffered a few injuries, he has never had Tommy John surgery. A casual look at his motion, however, indicates why he would be most effective as a reliever. He is the epitome of a maximum effort thrower, tiring quickly after 20 pitches, drenched in sweat. His motion would be difficult, if not impossible, for a starting pitcher to sustain. Therefore, although a great combination of power and longevity, he would translate poorly to ideal mechanics for a starter. Even for those fortunate enough to have long and successful careers, pulling relevant data can also be difficult. Take into consideration the career of John Smoltz, for example. A Hall of Famer, Smoltz pitched for 11 years before undergoing Tommy John surgery in 2000. He returned to baseball for 4 years as a reliever, throwing harder than he had previously had as a starter. He then returned to the starting rotation for another 5 years. When looking at how Smoltz delivers the ball, are we examining him prior to his surgery or after, as a starter or as a reliever? Pitchers adapt and change over the course of their careers, particularly after injury. A wild card in the analysis is the body itself. We all come in different shapes and sizes, with different heights, weights, limb lengths, muscle lengths, and even muscular control. What is easy for one, even with intensive training, may be impossible for another. Power can come from different parts of the body to create the kinetic chain required to throw the baseball. This can be particularly unintuitive, as smaller pitchers such as Marcus Stroman at 5 foot 8 inches tall can hit 95 miles per hour on their fastball. Larger pitchers, almost a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier, may struggle to consistently equal his velocity. This is also a product of survivor bias, as it has been demonstrated that smaller pitchers often outperform their larger peers. This is most likely due to the fact that they possess superior genetics and conditioning than their larger peers to have continued to the highest level of the game without what are normally considered advantages. Strength training programs have also shown to increase velocity as well. In 2019, Julio Teheran of the Atlanta Braves added size and strength in the offseason and saw an appreciable increase in throwing velocity. Do we examine his mechanics with his prior velocity in mind or his current? The final question we need to address is if the pitch type thrown has any impact on the onset of UCL damage. As a starting point, a 2016 study by doctors at the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit looked at 166 pitchers, both starters and relievers, half of whom had had Tommy John surgery, to attempt to find correlations between the surgery and a variety of factors. They found that the two groups were made up of relatively similar athletes, with similar average throwing speeds, weights, and innings. The only difference they discovered was that the group of pitchers who had surgery threw fastballs 46.8% of the time compared to 39.7% among those who had not had an operation. The researchers concluded that this increased risk was irrespective of velocity, and that for every 1% fastballs thrown, the risk of UCL damage increased by 2%. These results are interesting, but they bring up another question. What is a fastball? Studies looking at pitch types generally break baseball pitches down into broad categories such as fastball, slider, changeup, or curveball. The problem with this approach is that it does not factor in the almost infinite variations between pitchers on those pitch types. True, there might be some generally accepted principles, but every pitcher essentially throws their own version of the pitch, with different pressures applied to the ball and hand angles at release. This is easily visible when comparing the movement different pitchers achieve on the same general category of pitch. On the fastball, for instance, the thumb could be in a wide variety of locations on the ball, as can where the other fingers rest and how they are flexed. Pitch categories are too reductive an approach as they overlook a key element of pitching, how the arm and hand interact with the ball. Just like how Strasburg and Chapman both throw fastballs at high velocity, they do so from mechanically different standpoints, including arm angle and grip. Likewise, over the preceding decades, breaking balls in general, and specifically curveballs, had been demonized for causing either shoulder or elbow injuries. These risk factors have since been shown by several studies, including Glenn Fleissig and ASMI, to not be linked. The risk factors in throwing the various breaking balls is also difficult to ascertain as broad categorizations are used. It may not be the name of the pitch, but the way it is thrown that could lessen the risk of or contribute to UCL damage. The understanding of each of these three questions must provide the starting point for more comprehensive and useful analysis of the greater issue of what is causing so many UCL failures. The starting point is to recognize that pitchers, like humanity at large, are products of tremendous variation, and that each pitcher's capabilities should be viewed individually. This is a challenging approach, as all of modern baseball analysis attempts to categorize and rate the effectiveness of one player compared to another along categories of statistical performance. In the game itself, a home run is a home run, regardless of the manner achieved. This means that when searching for correlative trends, and hopefully the causations, we must go beyond one-size-fits-all approaches. In doing so, we aren't looking to hold up a single individual as an ideal, but follow where the trends lead to establish best practices. This approach must expand to include not just the pitching motion, but also how the ball is thrown, looking less at pitch categories and more what the body, hand, and arm do to deliver the ball. Join me for episode 16 next week. Remember, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Your support makes this work possible. Also, if you want to jump ahead, please consider picking up the book on Amazon from the link in the description below. See you next week.